Hello. Well, when I was asked to participate in this year's Memphis Monologues, I immediately started thinking, what in the world can I talk about? What might be of interest to this audience? And so I gave up on that and decided, I thought, well, I'm just going to talk about what is important to me, what forms the core of who I am, what's important in my life. And it's not particularly glamorous or exciting, but it's who I am. And that's being a volunteer. It's volunteerism. And it's something that's been a part of me for most of my life, actually for about 60 years of my life. And so my story and involvement goes back nearly 60 years ago. I think I remember, it probably goes further than that, but I remember around the age of 7 that I would tag along with my daddy as he would go about just doing for people. And with my mom, who would be cooking and taking care of people, often despite very difficult health and fragile health. And one of my earliest memories is when I remember my dad was volunteering, and actually he was doing by helping out with the campaign for the first black councilman in Nashville. Now this was just ground level kinds of things, passing out flyers, taking people to the polls, helping out on election day, election after election after election. And he did this way into his late 80s, and I would always be with him. And there were a lot of other things that he did to just, as he said, doing. And in our family, there was never a formal label for this. It's what we did, and I was always right along with my daddy. And then he did the same thing for the daughter of a longtime friend when she was campaigning for as a state legislator. And I remember moving back to Nashville at one point and going right along with my daddy, sitting around at the polls, helping him encourage people to vote. And when I went off to college, I found that there were other ways to help and to be doing. But the great thing about that was there was a label for what was going on. I was a volunteer. Before it was just doing. And so that was kind of exciting to have a label for it. And I remember in 1974, I moved to Memphis after graduate school, and I was working for the Memphis Public Library. And about a year later, I was working at, helping in a booth at the Community Information Fair at what was then Memphis State University. And it was near the end of the day, and I was on the second floor, and everyone from upstairs was gone. It was just myself and one other person. So this woman came across the aisle, and she just had this very beautiful look about her face, and she had with her something that looked like a scrapbook of sorts. And she just sat down, and she began to tell me this amazing story about her being in an internment camp and about her eventual liberation. She also talked about how she got reunited with her old friend, and they got married, and they ended up moving to Memphis. They eventually moved to Memphis. But I think what really continues to resonate with me and was part of what was my drive and desire to volunteer is a story that she shared with me during that time. And she said that she recalled boarding a bus here in Memphis, and there were no seats in the front of the bus, and so she went to sit in the back. And the bus driver, pretty crude terms, said to her, you can't sit in the back with those so-and-sos. And she was appalled, and she was determined that she was going to sit in the back. And the black people in the back said to her, lady, we don't want no trouble. And she looked at their face, and she knew, and she said she saw in their face the same look of people and herself when she was in the internment camp. And she knew then what she needed to do with her life. She got off the bus and decided she must commit herself to pursue justice and also to help people understand how terrible prejudice was, because she said it all started in the Nazi regime. It all started with prejudice, which led to discrimination, and discrimination led to destruction. And then she asked for my name. She hadn't asked for my name all this time. She just, walked up to me and started this conversation. And in this scrapbook that she actually had pictures of walking from the internment camp, being discovered by Red Cross nurses. She was so thin by then. She was in this pile of bones, and a Red Cross nurse had the feeling that there was someone alive, and they rescued her. And she said she didn't, come this far to get here in the South and deal with this and see more of this going on. So after she asked my name, she solemnly pronounced, "Carolyn Head, I see strength, generosity, and abundance of giving in your spirit." And then she invited me to be a part of her journey. And I was stunned. This woman was Nina Katz, not only an international humanitarian and Holocaust survivor, but someone who was an amazing mentor to a young 25-year-old who was new to the city and just trying to figure out what she was going to do with the rest of her life. And she did what she promised. She got me involved in many initiatives. The first was one called Coffee and Dialogue. And these initiatives established the foundation for my eventual involvement in numerous organizations that have spanned the 40 plus years or so since that, and I just call it a fateful meeting. And there are a lot of funny stories of this, going to her home at Christmas and being a part of Seder celebration. And she would always say, "You need to do that." Or, you need to do that. And what could you say? That, when Nina Katz says you need to do that, you and those of you who know her, when she says you need to do that, you do it. But it was amazing. It was wonderful. I was young. I was new to the city. And it was just a great way to start getting involved. And so some of the organizations that I've become involved with, and I think a lot of it has to do with hearing Nina in my head, in my heart, and my soul. There have been things like and these are just some of them. I've done this for like more than 40 years now. Mid-South Peace and Justice Center, Memphis Center for Independent Living. I've been a juvenile probation officer, Common Ground, Diversity Memphis, Out Memphis, Foster Care Review Board, Women of Achievement, Better Decisions, which was a women's prison initiative in Nashville, Leadership Memphis, Memphis School of Servant Leadership, and CASA, which is Court Appointed Special Advocate. And it was just weird. Yeah, I was interviewed today because I had said that if I ever retired, I was going to go back to being a CASA volunteer. It takes a lot of commitment. So when I was in Nashville, I did this, but I was getting too busy, but I committed to do it. So I retired last year and had my interview today and hope to do this a little bit later. So yeah, I retired this past August, and to some degree I kind of placed volunteering on hold as I was trying to contemplate the next stages of my journey. A good friend of mine who recently retired said, just take it easy for a while, enjoy yourself, and then kind of think about where you want to go. And so I've been taking classes at U of M. Dixie, the woman who unfortunately, fainted here. She got me into auditing classes at University of Memphis, which I'd been doing just at night for the last 5 years. But since I've retired, I can now audit classes during the day. And Dixie and I, usually sitting there next to each other, auditing classes and just having a good time. To take a class and not have to worry about grades, it's wonderful. I'm taking 3 classes right now and just having a ball. But I've been doing this past 60 of my 67 years, and so I envision continuing to volunteer for years and years and years. My dad was doing this, you know, he died at 92. He was, you know, at 90, he was out there tiling floors at church, cutting grass, you know, taking people here, doing stuff all the time. So I had this great role model. And so I hope that I can do the same thing. And as Reverend Floridia Jackson of Memphis School of Servant Leadership stated in a recent article, she said serving is an action verb. And her goal is not to be busy, but to remain active, available, and accessible. And I'm adopting that same philosophy. You know, people ask, what are you going to do when you retire? What are you going to do to keep busy? And I'm thinking, seriously? And I don't want to just keep busy. You know, in this city, we have the opportunity when you have to decide out of 4 or 5 things, what are you going to do tonight? There's always something, and there are always opportunities to volunteer and to give back. And so, you know, as the shared stories and journey and advocacy of Nina Katz continue to resonate in my spirit, in addition to the foundation laid by my parents, I'm continually reminded every day of the choices that I make and the things that I do.